Hello there and welcome. I'm glad you're here. This is Jennifer McGuire. Today I have something very special to introduce to you. It's a fresh new way to stencil. And the best part about this product line is that it came out of a conversation that I had with Gina K over at Gina K Designs. We were talking about some ideas for a class we were teaching together, and this brand new product was born. So it's kind of like our baby. I'm very excited to share it with you. Now, since this is a new type of product, I'm going to go over the basics today. But I have several videos coming up showing many ways to expand it. And I'm going to do a live with Gina where we'll share even more ideas. So be sure to stay tuned for that. I will share that information over on social media. But today, it's about the basics of a new product called a Stencil Builder. Now, if you've been a fan of Gina K over the years, you know that many years ago, she came out with Wreath Builders. That's the product you see on the left. There have been variations over the years, but this is the current large Wreath Builder on the left. This amazing, inexpensive tool allows you to create stamped wreaths or circular backgrounds, and you use it in a stamping tool such as the Misty. It's a great product. You'll see me use it today. Well, now she has a new product. This is the Stencil Builder over on the right. And this allows you to create kind of a circular background using stencils. Now, she has come out with a few designs to start out with. I'm going to demonstrate them today. They're inexpensive and a great tool to use in so many ways. Again, today is only about the basics. I will show much more and how you can use the Stencil Builder with other stencils you may have in the future. So today is about the Wreath Builder over on the left. This is the current design, and the Stencil Builder over on the right, which is brand new. Now, I found it helpful to put a few notes on my Wreath Builder and the Stencil Builder so I can have it every time I come back to use it and I don't have to remember. Let's look at the Wreath Builder first. That's the one you see here on the screen. I put little labels on it with some instructions to help me. You don't need to do this. You could also write it with a Sharpie if you prefer, or you can always refer back to a video like this one. But I printed little instructions and notes on this using my label maker. I'll link to the one I use below. And I'm covering it with some Scotch tape so that when I clean this with rubbing alcohol, it doesn't take the tape off or it won't take the Sharpie off. So putting tape on top of it is good. Now, I will talk about what these labels say as we go. I just wanted to mention this now because you're going to see them right away. These are just notes to myself so I don't mess up or forget how to use it in the future. All right, now that's the Wreath Builder. There's also the center portion to the Wreath Builder that you see me putting tape on right now. This helps with lining up stamps. If you're new to a Wreath Builder, I'll link to a video that shows some fun ways to use it up here in the top right and in the description below. Now let's move on to the Stencil Builder. That's this large square stencil. I just have a label up there and then I put on note on there on what size cardstock to use inside of it. So again, I'll talk more about this throughout the video. I find prepping a new tool like this with instructions is very helpful so that next time I come to use it, I don't have to remember things. I also do this with some embossing folders. If it has a unique sandwich, I'll print a label and put it on the embossing folder. Taking notes like this is always very helpful. You could also just put it on a Post-it note and keep it with the product. Okay, so now we have the large Wreath Builder on the left that's used for stamping, and then the Stencil Builder on the right that's used for stenciling. Because I've used the Wreath Builder in previous videos, I'm going to skip that for now. We'll come back to it later and move on to the Stencil Builder, which is the new product that you see on the right-hand side of the screen. Now, this Stencil Builder actually comes as part of a set. So there are 3 sets available right now. The first is the Pointed Oval Stencil Builder. It creates what you see over on the left, but the 3 stencils that come together in the set are on the right. You have the Stencil Builder that you see there in the top center, and that's what I was just showing you. And then the 2 inner stencils that look like pointed ovals or leaves. I will demonstrate this set today. Now, the second Stencil Builder option that Gina has is the Teardrop Stencil Builder. You can see the result on the left. The 3 stencils that come with it are on the right. You have the Stencil Builder once again, and then the 2 inner teardrop stencils. And then the third option for a Stencil Builder is the Dotted Swirl. This comes with the outer stencil builder and then the inside stencil that has little open dots. So all of them come with the stencil builder, which is nice. And so you have different design options. And then you can also use your stencil builder with other products, which I'll show in future videos. All right, I think it's best to get started right away creating a background, and you'll see how easy this is to use. We're using the Stencil Builder, which is something you don't need a stamping tool for. You can use a sticky mat or just tape it directly onto your desk. I will show a few different methods today. So on my Stencil Builder here, you see it says Stencil Builder in the top right, just so I remember that's what it is. And then up in the top left, it says 5 1/4 by 5 1/4. That is the size cardstock that fits into the Stencil Builder. Now I will show you how you can use different size cardstocks later in this video, but for now, we're starting with the square piece, 5 1/4 by 5 1/4. I will first demonstrate with the pointed oval Stencil Builder set. So in the set, you get the Stencil Builder, which is taped down to my work surface, and then these two inner stencils. One has a bigger leaf shape, one has a smaller leaf shape. And you can see they line up nicely. There are so many things you can do with these. I'm going to show you the basic here. Notice that the inner stencil fits right into the Stencil Builder, making it really foolproof to create these backgrounds. All right, the first thing you want to do is put your 5 1/4 by 5 1/4 white cardstock piece, or whatever color cardstock you want, into the center. You can temporarily adhere it to your work surface if you want to. Mine is just sitting in there. The cardstock will not move. Only this inner stencil that we put on top will move. So I'll put the inner stencil in the first spot. So you can see I'm lining up those 4 corners up on the top, bottom, right, and left with the Stencil Builder. So that inner stencil fits perfectly in there. Now you could hold it here, or you can put some tape. Again, if you want to work on a sticky mat, that's really easy and time saver, but I know not everyone has a sticky mat of some sort, so I thought I'd demonstrate this first. Now you can apply whatever ink you want to over here. I'm using Gina K Dye Inks just because I love the colors. I'm choosing to use the Lilac family and the Orchid family. I love those two together. I've used them in videos together many times. I'm putting light lilac ink towards the center of this leaf shape and light orchid ink towards the outside edge, and I'm allowing the inks to overlap. You'll notice that I don't have great blending. I'm just doing this very quickly. This is a very forgiving technique and very forgiving ink. I'll talk more about that. Now I can remove the stencil, leave the paper where it is, and I'm going to rotate this one turn. See how I rotate it one turn and line up those four corners up on the top, the bottom, the left, and the right. And then I'll tape that stencil down. So you'll see I've just shifted that pointed oval over one spot. And I'll apply the ink in the same way. Now, I mentioned that you really don't have to do a great job inking here. One reason is Gina's inks have a blending agent that will smooth out, which is very helpful. All right, real quick here, I'm going to rotate it one more turn. So I was here, rotate it another turn to the left, and press it down and repeat it. Okay, so I mentioned that these inks will blend on their own because of that blending agent. Also, we're overlapping a lot of inks here, so it really doesn't have to be done great. You could take a little more time to get a better blend, but I just want to quickly get color down so I end up with something bold in the end. All right, so I'm in that spot. I'll rotate it, tape it down, and ink it up again. Now, as I'm continuing to go around, I'll mention some other ways you could do this. You could do one color over each opening. You could also use a different color on each opening and maybe have like a rainbow flower shape in the end where each of the petals is a different color. You could put a mask over this, so maybe you have a different shape than a pointed leaf. I'll show that in a future video. But you can see how easy it is to line up with that Stencil Builder. So with the Stencil Builder, the cardstock does not move. It stays in that spot in the middle, so if you want to tape it there, you definitely can. You move the stencil when you're building on the Stencil Builder. That's a good way to remember it. You move the stencil when you're building on the Stencil Builder. This will change when we do the Wreath Builder, but right now we're focusing on the Stencil Builder. Now notice where these kind of petal shapes overlap. That creates a new color, and you're quickly going to create a great background. The examples I show today will all have like a focal point at the center, but in the future I'll show you how to create backgrounds that are very full and don't have so much a circular look. In the future, I will also show you how you can use other stencils inside of this Stencil Builder. All right, so now we have completed it. We've gone around all 8 of the spots, and look at this really cool background. It'll get even better as those inks start to blend together. I love the look of this. It creates a nice focal point right there at the center where you can add a sentiment or stamped image. You could leave it as is, but I'm moving on to the second inner stencil that comes in the Stencil Builder set. It has a slightly smaller pointed oval. Over this, I'm using darker colors. I'm using the dark lilac and the dark orchid, and I'm allowing those 2 colors to overlap in the center. And I will continue to rotate this one around just like we did the last one. And this is just putting darker color on top of what we've already put down. Now I could have used the same ink for the first stencil and the second one. Over the first one I could have gone very light-handed, and over the second one I could have gone very heavy-handed. But these inks are available in the light, medium, and dark, so I thought I'd just go ahead and use the light and the dark. I wanted this center area to be very bold with a softer kind of halo around it. Now when you're blending 2 colors together like this, the key is to overlap the inks. So you'll notice I'll put one color down, but I go past the halfway point. Then I put the other color down and I go past the halfway point. And where those overlap is where you get better blending. So I'm going to continue to move this around. Each time I'm just turning one little turn in the same direction. Don't worry if you lose your place. It's really easy to figure out where the next position is because of the bold background design that you're creating. While I continue, I'll throw out a few more ideas. You could lay another stencil, maybe with like a dot print, over the Stencil Builder, and that way you would end up with like polka dot leaves here or polka dot petals. You could stamp over this opening with maybe a polka dot stamp, and that way you would also have polka dot leaves or polka dot petals. So you can build on this basic design. I'm again focusing on the basics today because I think this is a brilliant system. I just love it. Gina did a great job bringing our ideas to life because I am no product designer. And look how cool that looks. It'll look better as those inks blend into each other, but it looks amazing as is. Now, there is an additional product that Gina has available. It's just one single large stencil that you can use with your Stencil Builder or without it. It is the Raise stencil, and it is the same size as the Stencil Builder. It's just this one stencil. It comes by itself. You can lay it over the Stencil Builder. I just have my cardstock in there, and I'm laying this on top, lining up with the outside edges of the Stencil Builder and taping it in place. Now I can ink on this, and this will just build on the pattern. I'm using Gina K white pigment ink and a Tim Holtz tiny blending tool. And I'm dragging this white ink from the center out to the edge. When I do this, some of the wet ink will get dragged out into the white area, leaving like a little bit of light pink ink towards the edges. You could not have that spread of ink if you just dab with the white ink, but I wanted to kind of drag some of that pink ink out while it's still a little wet. Now, I did make a mistake here. I forgot to dab off the excess ink from the stencil. Before you remove this, make sure you wipe it off. You see the little globs of white ink along the edges? I could have avoided that if I would have wiped the stencil first. I forgot to. So here I'm just kind of wiping away some of the excess white ink. You can then heat set this. You could white heat emboss it. You could add perfect pearl pigment powder to it so it has shine, but I'm just going to leave it as that white bit of ink, and it just adds to that pattern. It's kind of hard to see the light pink that's dragged out from the tips of those petals, but I can see it in real life, and it just adds a little touch of color. Okay, so that stencil, you could also line it up and rotate it and add more rays, but I'm going to leave it as is. I like that this option allows you to build on top of any of your backgrounds that you create with the Stencil Builder. Okay, now let's turn this into a card before I move on to more techniques. So I'm trimming this down to be 4 1/4 by 5 1/4. Now you could simply add this to a card and put a sentiment in the center, but I thought I would demonstrate 3 fun folds today to kind of step things up a little bit. So this first one is a gatefold with a floating sentiment on the front. Super easy to do. Now for a sentiment, I'm using the Gina K Thank You Trio die set. This is a new one. You have the word thank and then the outline for you and then the shadow for them together. So you could use that you with other things, but I'm going to use the sentiment together today. There is also a new Hello Sunshine of the same style. I'll use that in an upcoming video, but today I'm using the thank you. So I die cut thank from like an orchid glitter cardstock, and I also cut it from white cardstock. I'm gluing those together for a little dimension and adding it onto the white shadow die cut, which is 2 layers thick. Now for the U, the letters for the word U, they're actually overlapping with the thank. So what I did is I glued 3 of each letter together. So here I have the Y. I'm going to cut off a little bit of the top of this Y, of the stacked white die cuts, so that it doesn't overlap the thank. So you can see me cut a little bit off the top there. And then on top of that, I will glue a dark purple glitter Y. That way, when I glue this down, the glitter paper overlaps with the orchid thank that I already have there, but it pops up a little bit more. So you can see the bottom of the Y has more dimension than the top. Now, you could skip that. You could just glue down 1 layer of the 2 purple die cuts on top of each other and it'd be fine. But I wanted that stacked dimension. I wanted thank to stick out a little bit and you to stick out even more. So I decided to take the time to do it and I loved the results in the end. But this is your reminder to do whatever works for you. If you don't like the added layer or taking the time to do the added layers, just glue the die cuts down. You don't have to worry about anything. I just love that added detail and added dimension. Okay, so once I've finished that thank you, you can see how it really stands out and you have that great shine to it. Now we can create our card base. While that dries, I'll cut my background in half. This is 4 1/4 inches wide, so I'm cutting it at 2 1/8 of an inch. But really it's easy to figure out because you just cut right down the top and bottom petals. You can see it lines up there with my trimmer edge and just cut it right in half. Okay, so now I need a card base. I have a card base that is 8.5 by 5 1/4. And I'm scoring 2/8 of an inch from each end. So there's 2/8 of an inch, and I'll rotate it and do the same. The 2/8 of an inch is just 1 little groove over from the 2-inch mark. I will then fold both of these in so they meet there at the center. And there we have a very simple gatefold card. I can finish that off by adding our 2 panels to the 2 front flaps, and these will meet nicely in the middle. This is just a fun change up from a basic folded card. All right, now let's do something that allows the sentiment to kind of float in front of the card. It's super easy to do, and you can do this with a variety of products. You just need to make a small folded piece of cardstock. I'm starting with a piece of cardstock that is 1/2 inch by 1 inch, and I'm folding it in half. I will put glue on one side of that folded piece. I put some tape runner on there, but then I also put some liquid adhesive. I really want to make sure that stays. And I'm placing it right along the left edge of that gatefold so that the score line of that little piece lines up with the edge of the gatefold there on the left. It's easier to see than explain. You can see it's just glued there in the center and it just sticks out. Looks a little funny, but it works great. Now, once I'm sure that's secured, I'll put some adhesive on the other side of the folded piece. So I put some tape runner and a little liquid adhesive. And now onto that, I will place my sentiment. And I'm trying to center it up there. And then I'll hold it there while it dries. And so the only way this sentiment is secured to the card is that little flap. And because we put it to the little flap, when this card comes out, look at how it looks like it's floating in front. It just looks really cool on display. Now on the inside, I created a pink mini note card. It's top folding. It's about 3 3/4 inches wide by 4 3/4 inches tall. I thought I'd add a little sentiment there, so I'm using the new Gina K All at Once Occasion stamp set and coordinating die. Now the stamp set I believe is free right now, the time this video comes out, with purchases of like $75 or more. There'll be information in my description below. And then the die you can get to coordinate with it. And what happens is you stamp all of the sentiments at once. It's one big stamp. And then you use the die to cut them all out at once. And she plans to have more sentiments that line up with the die. I'll talk more about that in a moment. Now here I have the Gina K Intri-Cut die cut machine. This is one of my favorite die cut machines. It's so easy to use because of the dials on the side. And I'm very excited because Gina now has a magnetic platform that goes with this machine. So the platform has three things, the base and the C plate. And the neat thing is these are magnetized so they hold together. So you don't have to deal with extra plates. So those are stuck together. On top of the C plate, you place your cardstock and your die, and it's a magnet, so it holds the die in place. Then you put the cutting plate on top and run it through. The nice thing about the Intri-Cut machine is these are your only plates. To change it for embossing folders or other techniques, you just change the dial on the side. If you're new to this machine, I will link to a video all about it up here on the top right and in the description below. But now she has the new magnetic platform, which I'm super excited about, and you'll see it in action in future videos. Here you can see how the stamp set and die allows you to quickly make a bunch of sentiments. And by the way, you're cutting into the magnetic platform and there are no warping issues. All right, so now I'm going to glue this sentiment here in the center, and this will just give a little bit more interest when you open up the card. Now you don't have to put a mini card on the inside, but I really like that pop of pink showing through. And also when this card is on display and you can see through the gatefold, you don't see the personal message inside because there's that folded pink note card. All right, so I finished off the card just by adding a few little gemstones to the pattern on the front. I love adding that bit of shine, but you definitely could skip it if you want to. You could also add some stamped images into the stencil built background, which I'll demonstrate on the next card. But I really just wanted to leave this with that bold purple and pink color and that fun sentiment in the center. And because of the fun fold that we did, it looks like our sentiment kind of floats out in front of the card when it's on display. I love cards that look cool on display because really that's where it's going to spend most of its time. And the technique really didn't add much bulk. All right, so there we have kind of a basic stencil built background. Now let's step it up by doing stencil building and wreath building with a stamp together on the same background. We'll first start with the Stencil Builder, so you'll see it in action again. This time, instead of taping the Stencil Builder onto my work surface, I'm using a sticky mat. This is a sticky mat from Simon Says Stamp and Brutus Monroe. It will hold my Stencil Builder and my cardstock in place. You could use any kind of grip mat or sticky mat for this. In the center of the Stencil Builder, I have a 5 1/4 by 5 1/4 inch piece of cardstock. This time I'm using the Teardrop Stencil Builder, which has these two inner stencils that look like teardrops. One is bigger than the other, and I'll use them together for a bit of layering, but remember you could use them separately too. I'll start with the bigger one first and place it right into the Stencil Builder. You can see all of the corners, all the little points line up, and that sticky mat will help to hold it in place. This time I'm going for some bright colors. I have light carnation here, and I will put a very light application of light carnation over this. Again, it's not going to be pretty right now, but the blending agent in this ink will smooth out and it'll look great in the end. I tried to put the ink a bit heavier towards the center. Now this time, instead of going to the next spot, I'm going to skip that spot. So that would be the next spot. I'm going to skip it and go to the third spot. So you can see I'm going to turn the corner one more time. So now we have a teardrop going up and a teardrop to the left. And I'll apply the same ink. Once I'm done with this, I will turn it one time and skip that time. So watch, turn there, skip that, go to the next one, and I'll apply the ink. The reason I'm doing this is I wanted to alternate between two different colors. On our last example, I did each of these petals or shapes the same. This time, I wanted every other one to be pink and every other one to be yellow. After I've done these four, I'll clean off my stencil, put the stencil back into the builder in the original position, and turn it one spot. So it's that in-between spot. Over these in-between spots, I'll apply yellow. This is a beautiful yellow. I love this. It's not too bright. It's called Sweet Corn. I put a little heavier towards the center and lighter towards the edge. Notice where the Sweet Corn overlaps with the pink color, we get an orange color. All right, so then I move it over 2 spots, so I'm in that other in-between spot, and I'll apply more of the Sweet Corn. Then I will do it again where I rotate it 2 spots to get to the next in-between. So this is another way you can use the Stencil Builder to add more color. You could do each petal a different color. So many things you can do with it. This time I'm just using the 2 colors. All right, so once I have this done, we can move on to the second inner stencil. This has the smaller teardrop shape. And I'll line it up with the carnation, large one there. This time I'm applying medium carnation, putting it more heavy towards the center. Then I will skip a spot and go to that left-hand teardrop shape, and I'll repeat this. So I'm putting the medium carnation on top of the light carnation. So you really don't have to pay attention to the turns here because you're just going on top of the other color that you did before. All right, so once I've done all 4 in the medium carnation, I'll clean off the stencil and I will go on top of the light sweet corn yellow with a soft amount of sweet mango, which is a nice kind of apricot orange. So as I do this, as I put this color on top of the yellow petals, I thought I'd mention some more ideas. You could do stencil building on a dark color of cardstock and maybe do a darker color ink for the first round of petals. Then for the second round of petals on top of that, use a white pigment ink. You could also add some heat embossing. You could do glaze as long as you take the time to dry in between. So many things you can do. But what I'm going to show with this second example is how you can add stamping to this using the Wreath Builder. Remember I talked about the Wreath Builder goes into a stamping tool such as the Misty. The Wreath Builder has been a product Gina's had for many years. This is the current design of it. And I put some labels on it to help me remember how to use it. Now, when you use the large Wreath Builder, you put it into the corner of your stamping tool. So that flat edge over on the left, where there's just a little bit of stencil material, goes up against the edge of your Misty stamping tool. That's what the label says there. Now, it doesn't matter which way you use your Misty. You could use it this way or the other way. I use it the other way. But the large Wreath Builder goes into your Misty stamping tool, so that little thin edge over there where I'm pointing lines up with the edge of your Misty. So it's lined up there. That's what my note says on it. So part of that label there on the left says this edge goes along the Misty edge. So I remember that goes there. It also says the paper edge does not go there. So you never line your paper up on that left edge. So how I have it here, never line it up that way. Instead, the paper you put into the Wreath Builder always lines up over on the right. That's why I have a little label up there on the right that says line up paper here. So that big label on the left-hand side will always be covered. And in fact, my cardstock will always hang out of the Misty. You can see it's hanging out on the left. If it's hanging out, you know you're doing it right. And I promise this is easy to do. I just want to make sure you get it set up right. I also like to put little dots here. You'll see I add arrows later on. That reminds me of what corners to line up each time and where to change. So I will show that in a moment. But again, this is a piece of 5 1/4 by 5 1/4 inch cardstock. You use the same size cardstock for both the Stencil Builder and the Wreath Builder. So I'm taking that Stencil Builder background that we created and bringing it into my Misty in the Wreath Builder. This will allow us to add a stamped pattern on top of the stenciled pattern. I'm using the new Gina K Everything Brighter stamp set. This 6x8 stamp set has lots of images that are great for building wreaths and also to add stamping to your Stencil Builder backgrounds, which we're doing here. I chose a dot pattern and I'll line it up with one of my yellow petals here. You could line it up with the pink one, it doesn't really matter. But notice my cardstock is in the correct position. It's lined up over on the right-hand side of the opening inside of our Wreath Builder. I'll close the door on my stamping tool to grab that stamp, and now we can stamp along our stencil background. So on top of the yellow and orange petal, I'm choosing to stamp with Sweet Mango ink. That was the color that I used for the shading, but this is much darker because I'm stamping it directly. So I'll stamp it once, and to make it a bit darker, I'll stamp it again. So that is my first stamped image. Now, in the Stencil Builder, we rotated the stencil. The paper stayed still. But in the Wreath Builder, your paper rotates because there's no stencil to rotate, right? So I'm going to take my paper and move it one spot to the right. So watch, I'm going to rotate this corner to the next corner and line it up in the Stencil Builder. The cardstock is still hanging out the side of the Misty on the left. That's okay. Now in this spot, we'll stamp again. Since I'm stamping on top of a pink petal, this time I'll stamp with the medium carnation color. You could use the same one for every petal if you wanted to simplify. So I'll stamp that twice just to make it a little bit darker. So what's happening is we're stamping on this next position, and it's lined up just like it was on the last petal. Okay, now with the Wreath Builder, you turn your cardstock. So I'm going to turn the cardstock one more position to the right. So I'll take this corner down to this corner, and I'll line up my cardstock over there on the right into the little corners. Notice my cardstock still hangs out the left a bit of the Misty. This time I'll stamp with the Sweet Mango again, since I'm stamping on top of the yellow and the orange. All right, once I've done that, I can rotate another corner from here to here. Again, lining up only on the right because that's what my little label says to do. And my cardstock hangs out over on the left of the Misty. This time I'll stamp with the medium carnation. Now, if you want to use the Wreath Builder without the Stencil Builder, this could just be a plain piece of cardstock, and you could use any stamp image and create a wreath or background this way. I've done many videos with wreath building. I will link to a playlist up here on the top right in my description below. But now with the Stencil Builder, you can do both. You first do your Stencil Builder background and then bring it into the Misty with your Wreath Builder and add some stamping. Now, notice each time I go from one corner to the next over on the right. So I'm going to put arrows there. So I want to move from that corner to that one. You can see the arrows there, and I'll do some stamping. This is very easy once you get the process going. And I find the little labels and arrows just help me out. So next time when I haven't used it in a while, I'll remember how. Now for the next spot, I'm going to move from this corner to the one on the bottom right. So I put an arrow there. Each time you're moving between one of those arrows. And every time your cardstock is hanging out the left. It makes it easy. Now, Gina did have a giant wreath builder that required the giant Misty stamping tool. I'm so glad she's now designed one that works really well in the original size Misty. All right, so now I'll stamp this one in pink, and look at that. We have added some fun stamping to our Stencil Builder background. So we combine both the Stencil Builder and the Wreath Builder together. They can be used together or separately. I found those arrows helpful, so I'm going to put some tape over those so that they don't get cleaned off and erased if I were to clean this with some rubbing alcohol. But now this is set up, and I have the notes on it, and I'll remember every time I use it how to line it up, and it'll be foolproof. Now, again, I will do more with Wreath Builder in the future, along with the Stencil Builder. This is just the basics here of using them together. And be sure to check out the many Wreath Builders videos I've done where I even create full backgrounds, not just like a circular pattern. All right, now it's time to turn this one into a card. I'm back to my Intri-Cut die cut machine, and I have that magnetic platform in there. I love this, that'll hold everything in place, and I'm really only having to deal with one platform and one plate because those two stick together with the magnet. I am die cutting from the center of this using a rectangle with faux stitching from the Gina K Designs Master Layouts 2 die set. It's a must-have die set that has lots of basics. The two dies in this set that I really like are this one that creates a rectangle with the faux stitching, and then a slightly bigger rectangle die that creates a very fine mat. And I cut my mat from black cardstock. I just like that fun pop of black trim around this bold color background that we've created. I thought it'd be fun to add 3 sentiment strips to the center of this card. I'm using Gina K shaker strips to put on the back of them. I found this to be the right size, so instead of cutting more die cuts and stacking them, this seemed easy enough to do. I put the shaker strip on the back of each of those sentiment strips that were made with that all-at-once stamp set and die that I showed you earlier. I white heat embossed the sentiments on black cardstock and then used the die to cut them all out at once. Now I want to make sure these are straight on here. So I have a sticky mat here and a T-roller, a 6-inch T-roller from Simon Says Stamp. I love this thing. It's going to help me get these centered and straight. If I don't have this straight, I think it'll be pretty obvious. And by using my T-ruler up against my card panel on a sticky mat, it holds that T-ruler in place. As I line up my sentiment strip up against it, making sure it's straight and centered, I love that the sticky mat works with the tea roller to help me out here. I really find having some sort of sticky mat in your crafty arsenal is key, along with a tea roller such as this one. And I like that this 6-inch tea ruler has measurements on it that are helpful to a card maker because it was designed by a card making company. So I put Thinking of You in the center and then a smaller sentiment above and below that. And I love how those stand out on the color. Now let's put this on a fun fold card base instead of a regular one. This also has the card panel that looks like it's floating in the front. Doing this is very easy and can be done with any card. So I have a piece of cardstock that is 6 3/8 by 5.5, and I'm scoring it at 4 1/4 inches and then folding along that. So basically you have a note card where half of the card front is cut off. Now, to attach our card panel to that, I'm cutting another rectangle of the same size as that white one. And I'll score this in half. So this panel is 3.5 by 4 3/4. So I'm scoring it right down the middle at 1 3/4 inches and folding that in half. This will be the flap that attaches our card panel to our fun fold. So along one side of this folded piece, I'll put adhesive, and then I'll put this on the back left of our card panel. So I'm putting it so the score line is towards the center and the open edges are out towards the left-hand side. This is very similar to what we did on our last card, but this little folded piece here is much bigger. Now I'll put adhesive on the back of this side of the flap and place it right down onto our card. So that little folded piece will glue to that left-hand flap on our card base. We'll center this up, and now you can see how our card panel looks like it's floating on the front of our card base when it's on display. Very similar to the last one, where it looks like it's floating. We just have the whole card panel floating on the front instead of just the sentiment. Just something fun and different to do. I die cut another of the rectangle with the faux stitching from white cardstock, and I'll glue that to the inside. And this will give me a nice place to write my personal message. I also wanted to stamp a small message in there, so I'm using the new Gina K Dye Ink Smiling Blooms bundle. You can buy the stamp set or the stamp set and dies. I am just using the sentiment that says, I hope you're doing well. There's lots of beautiful sentiments in there. They have coordinating dies for many of them, but I'm just using a simple one on the inside. Now I stamped that in black ink, and I also added some gemstones to the front because when I have a geometric pattern, I like to add gemstones, but you totally could skip that if you wanted to. You could instead add more stamping with the Wreath builder. You could add other embellishments, but I really like that this creates a focal point where you have your sentiment there at the center. You could instead put maybe like a pretty floral image there or a bird or whatever you want, but I like to keep it simple so that background shines. And remember, this looks really cool on display because of the fun fold and that little flap that we made. It looks like the card panel on the front is floating in front of the card. Just something fun and easy to do to change up your card design. Okay, let's move on to my third example for today. And in this one, I show you how to use just the Stencil Builder, but have your focal point offset. So notice the focal point of that circular background is towards the top left of that pool colored panel. This is surprisingly easy to do, and the same technique can allow you to do one of these patterns on a bigger piece of cardstock. Now the key to this is to create a template. This is something you can use over and over again. I'm just cutting it from some yellow cardstock so I don't lose it. And I'm cutting this template to be 5 1/4 by 5 1/4, so it fits nicely into our Stencil Builder. Now I have a piece of pool color cardstock that I die cut. This is about 3.5 by 4 3/4 inches. I use that Master Layouts 2 die set to cut it. Now I can temporarily adhere this piece onto that yellow template wherever I want. And that will change the position of the pattern we do on it. So let's just try it. So if I put some temporary adhesive there and tape my, my blue piece onto that yellow template, kind of hanging off the bottom here. And we put this Stencil Builder on top. The center of my pattern will be towards the top of that pool. So I'm just laying the stencil on there to see what happens. Now let's try it over here towards the right. Let's put the stencil on top, and you'll see the center of the pattern will be over to the left-hand side on that pool piece. So you can move that little pool piece anywhere you want on the template, and it changes where your pattern will be built. to make things easier, I'm going to put a little temporary adhesive on the back of my template so it stays put. Now, if I want my pattern to be built right in the center of this pool piece, I can just temporarily adhere it to the center of that yellow template. But what I want is to build my pattern with the center towards the top left. So I'm going to have my pool piece hang off the bottom of the yellow template and over to the right a bit. And that will allow the center to be up there in the top left corner. So you can play around with this however you want. This is just the look that I was going for today. As long as that yellow 5 1/4 by 5 1/4 inch template stays in the center, it doesn't matter if the piece that you're inking on is hanging out from it. So once I'm happy with the position, it's time to start inking, and we use the Stencil Builder just as I've already shown you twice. Except the only difference is part of my cardstock's hanging out there on the bottom. So I did decide to put a large Post-it note over that so I don't accidentally ink onto the cardstock off the edge there. But I'll just tape this in place. Again, I could have worked on a sticky mat as I did with my second example. And I just ink over this. This is the dotted Swirl Stencil Builder. It's got this one inner stencil with the outside Stencil Builder. And it's time to ink away. I'm using sea glass here. And I'll apply sea glass over both sides. You could do one side of these dotted swirls one color and the other side another color. I decided to do them all the same to keep it simple. And notice that my pattern kind of hangs off onto that yellow template. That's okay. It's okay. As long as I'm building up my stencil inking on that pool piece. Now the yellow template and that pool piece will stay where they are. I'm going to clean off my stencil, lift off the inner stencil, and rotate it one turn. So I'll rotate it one turn. Notice the Post-it note goes with it. That's fine. And I'll ink it up this time with blue raspberry. Now I decided to start with a colored cardstock piece and put color inks on top. You could do whatever you want. Once I'm done, I'll wipe that clean. I'll pick up my stencil and move it to the next position, turning it one rotation. So I'll just turn it to the next spot. And I thought I'd go back to the sea glass ink. I'm just kind of randomly doing colors here. You could do a different color over each. You could do a rainbow. I just thought I would mix up some blues and greens. So the process I'm going through here is just like I did on my other Stencil Builder backgrounds. The only difference is in that opening of the Stencil Builder, I have a template, and glued temporarily to that template is a smaller piece of cardstock that's just kind of hanging off. This allows my pattern to be built up there in the top left corner. There are many different ways you could do this, but I found after trying many things, this was the easiest. And you can see how it's building this pattern exactly where I wanted it on that pool colored piece. So I'm just going to continue to go around all 8 positions. After doing some sea glass and the blue raspberry, I'm switching to key lime and lucky clover so I can have a bit of green in there too. You could get really fancy with the technique here. You could trace in these little dots with different color markers. I'm going very basic here, and I love the results in the end. Now, the 2 earlier Stencil Builder sets I showed you comes with the outside Stencil Builder and 2 inner stencils. This only comes with the 1, but that's all you need to create this really cool pattern. And you could build this pattern along with the other Stencil Builders to get lots of layering, and it looks really cool. All right, so now I'm done with this piece, and I can finish this card off however I want. If I wanted to add stamping to this, I'm not going to, but if I wanted to, let me show you what I would do. I'd put the large Wreath Builder stencil into my MISTI stamping tool following my little label instructions. And I would just do the stamping on here each time, lining up the corners of the yellow template over there on the right-hand side of our Wreath Builder. So I could put it there, do some stamping, rotate, do some stamping, and then rotate again. Again, I don't want to add any stamping to this. I like it as is, but you can take that template out of your Stencil Builder and bring it to the Wreath Builder to add stamping if you want to. And I will show that in a future video. But I just am happy with this as it is. This would be great for a celebration or birthday card because it kind of looks like fireworks. Now I'll carefully remove my little panel from my template, and I'll save the template for the future. Now let's create a focal point for this card. I'm using an older favorite of mine. This is the Gina K Designs You Give Me Butterflies 6x8 stamp set. There are coordinating stencils to color in the flowers and butterfly, and coordinating dies. I love the sentiments in this one. Today I decided to white heat emboss that butterfly on vellum and die cut it. I then die cut an extra vellum butterfly, you can see up on the top right, and I'm gluing that to the back of our white heat embossed butterfly. And I'm only putting the glue on the back of where the heat embossing is so it's hidden. The reason I'm doing this is so I can double up my vellum so it's less see-through and you don't see as many of the dots through it. I wanted this butterfly to be subtle, but I didn't want it to get lost on all of the dots we stenciled. I'll then glue this panel onto a black cardstock panel that I cut with the slightly larger rectangle from the Gina K Designs Master 2 layout set. Now let's do our fun fold card base. This is actually an easel card design, very simple and easy to do. You need to start with a piece of heavyweight cardstock cut to 4 1/4 inches by 8 1/2 inches, and we'll score it in 2 spots, 2 3/4 inches and 5 1/2 inches. I've done many easel card videos. I will link to a playlist below of lots of different easel card designs if you're interested. Now I'll fold along each of those score lines, and there we have our easel card base. Now I will glue this panel to the bottom flap on the front of our card, only on the bottom flap. So I put adhesive only below that score line. I'll place our panel onto it. And now it's adhered there, but you can see it'll pop up like an easel and stand nicely on display. Okay, next up we add our butterfly. I'm putting just a bit of liquid adhesive behind where that white heat embossing is and adding it to the focal point of our stenciled background. Then on top of that, I can add the Love and Hugs, which was also made with that All at Once stamp set and die set that I showed you earlier. I created another doubled up vellum butterfly like I did before. I'm putting liquid adhesive on the back of it behind the embossing, and this one will get glued to the bottom inside of our card. This is what the easel opening will prop up against when it's on display. I also created another one of those little sentiment strips. In fact, I created them all at once. I'm just using another one and adding that there on the center. I like having a sentiment on the inside and the outside. I did finish this off with a few clear gemstones along the stenciled pattern in the background just for a little bit of sparkle. And when the recipient opens this, they can prop the front of the card up against the tip of that inside butterfly wings, and it stands up really nice on display. Just something fun and different to do. And you can see how I was easily able to create a circular background pattern that's offset by creating a template to use in my Stencil Builder. Once you start using the Stencil Builder, it's really easy to use, and you can change up the way you use it and the different looks you get, which I will be showing in future videos and that live that I'll do with Gina K Designs very soon. So there you have it. I'm really excited to finally share with you this baby. Gina, thank you for designing this so well. Knocked it out of the park. I will be back, along with Gina, to share more ways to use the Stencil Builder, more creative ways to use it, including how to use it with stencils you have. If you're interested in the supplies I used, the videos or playlists I mentioned, or how to get that free stamp set with purchase, it's all in the description below. You can also head over to my blog with a lot more information and photos. I thank you so much for watching. Have a great day.